All right, so today's lesson is Module 4, Lesson 7. We're going to review the concept development. There are 5 questions today, and the learning objective is I can multiply any whole number by a fraction using a tape diagram. Please pay attention to the fact that we are going to be using, tape diagrams today in solving all of our problems. Problem 1 asks us, what is 3/5 of 35? So the first thing I'm going to do is set up the tape diagram that we talked about. Okay, the tape diagram represents our total amount. Now, do we know the total of this tape diagram? Yes, we do, because we know we're looking for 3 parts of a total broken up into 5 parts, and that total is 35. So our total is 35. Now we're going to look for what 3 out of the 5 would be, or how much that would represent. So if we're to break up a total using a tape diagram into 5 equal parts, that means we're going to use 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 4 lines will get us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Okay, the question we're looking for is not what all 5 of those parts are, because we obviously know that's 35, but what 3 of the 5 parts are. So we're going to be looking for this amount right here, from here to here. Okay, well, what is something we do know? We do know that 5 units is equal to 35. Okay, but the question we're trying to figure out is, what is 1 unit? Because when we figure out the single unit, we know that we can insert those into each of our 1/5 spots. Remember, we were solving this in the classroom by taking our total amount, 35. We were dividing it by how many parts were in the whole, which was 5. And we were able to figure out that each unit had the value of 7. So if we know that all units are worth 7, we can check that by saying 7 5 times does in fact equal 35. But what would 3 of those units equal? And the answer is 7, 14, 21 is the answer to question 1. Problem 2 tells us a story. Aurelia buys 2 dozen roses. Of these roses, 3/4 are red and the rest are white. How many white roses did she buy? So the first thing to know is that Aurelia buys 2 dozen roses. It's important to know what a dozen represents. 1 dozen equals 12. So if we had 2 dozen, that would be 12 2 times, which would equal 24. That's going to give us the total amount of roses that Aurelia buys. So we're going to draw our tape diagram, as is our lesson objective. And we do know the total, so we're going to write 24 as the total. It continues to say, of these roses, 3/4 are red. Now, I know that the author of this problem is dividing this total 24 into 4 equal parts, because it tells us 3/4 are red. So I'm going to use 3 lines to make 4 equal units. And it tells me that 3 of the 4 are red. So I'm going to just put an R in 3 of the 4 to remind myself that 3 of the 4s are red and the rest are white, which means that 1/4 of them are white. The question asks, how many white roses did she buy? So we need to figure out just this 1/4 right here. So essentially we're just figuring out what the single unit is worth. So as we did before, we know that 24 divided by the amount that the whole is broken into, which is 4, can give us our single unit amount, which is 6. So that means that each of these 1/4 units are worth 6. Okay, since we're only looking for the white roses, the 1/4 unit we can answer our problem that 6 were white, and those were the, how many white roses did she buy? 6 white roses. Problem 3 says Rosie had 17 yards of fabric. She used 1/3 of it to make a quilt. How many yards of fabric did Rosie use for the quilt? Okay, so let's start by doing our tape diagram. Oops. Okay. And the question is, do we know the total of our tape diagram? Does our story problem tell us what the total amount is? It says Rosie had 17 yards, so we know that she had a total of 17 yards. It tells us she used 1/3 of it to make a quilt. So we can divide our total into 3 equal parts. Because we know she didn't use all of it, we know she only used 1/3 of it to make her quilt. Okay. The question asks us, how many yards of fabric did Rosie use for the quilt? So just like in the questions prior, we know that to identify the single unit, what we have to do is we have to take our total, 17, we have to divide it by one of the parts, which is, or how many parts the whole is broken up into, which is 3 parts, which is going to give us the total. Now, 3 doesn't go into 17 very evenly, so you might want to come over here and do some long division if that makes you more comfortable. You know that 3 goes into 17 5 times, subtract with a remainder of 2. Now remember, when we have a remainder, we can use it as our numerator, and we can use the divisor as our denominator. There we go. So the answer is that each of these thirds here has a value that is equal to 5 and 2. This is not being very nice to me. 5 and 2/3, 5 and 2/3, 5 and 2/3. But we only are really looking for what this one is right here, because she only used one of the thirds to make a quilt. So the answer is she used 5 and 2/3 yards to make her quilt. Problem 4 asks us what 2/3 of a number is 8. So it's really saying 2/3 of, it's telling us what 2/3 of a number is, that it is 8, but it's asking us what the total number is. Really, it's asking us what the 3/3 is. So let's go ahead and draw our tape diagram. And do we know the total? No, we don't. That's what we're solving for. It's asking us what is the number. But we do have some information. First of all, we know that the total is being broken up into 3 equal parts because the denominator is 3. So we can draw 2 lines to represent the 3 parts. And we know that 2 of these parts, 2 of these 3 is equal to 8. Okay, so if you know that 2 units are equal to 8, you can figure out what the single unit is by doing 8 and dividing it by the 2 equal parts, which would get you 4. So 4, if this one's 4 and this one's 4, well, of course, this one would also have to be 4, which would give us a total amount of 12. So 12 is the number that they are looking for. All right, so our last problem, problem 5, tells us that Tiffany spent 4/7 of her money on a teddy bear. If the teddy bear cost $24, how much money did she have at first? So we're really looking for a starting price. We know that she has a total amount, so I'm going to just draw the tape diagram to represent the total. Okay, we don't know what the total is that she starts with, but we know that that total is divided into 7 equal parts. So I'm going to draw 6 lines to show 7 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equal parts. It lets us know that 4 out of those 7 is spent on a teddy bear. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This all goes for a teddy bear. And we also know that those 4 units are equal to $24. So how much money did she have at first? Well, we don't know that yet. We have to first identify what the single unit is. And the information we have right here is that we know that these 4 units right here are equal to the cost of the teddy bear, which is 24. So how do we find out what a single unit is? Remember, we take the 24, our total amount, we divide it by the amount of units we have. 4 goes into 24, 6 times evenly. So 1 unit is worth $6. And we can check that by saying, does 6, 12, 18, 24, is that true? Did we say 24? Yes, it was. We're going to continue evenly placing the $6 in each of the missing units. And we have a total of 24 for the teddy bear, 18 for the money she had left over. If you add that up, you see that she started with $42.